Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 265. I'm not shy, damn it. You probably already know that I'm not shy, given that I'm 4.5 years on in my podcasting journey. But I can't tell you how many people question whether I'm really an introvert, given the job I do as a leadership trainer, coach and facilitator working with international clients. You'd think that this day and age, people would be educated enough to know the difference, but apparently not. As a species, we seem intent on labelling everything and anything. So can we at least get the labels right? So in this episode, I'll be saying it how it is, and if it rattles a few cages and upsets a few, so be it. Because honestly, I'm a bit wound up right now. We're spending far too much time paddling around in a mislabelling quagmire at the expense of growing intentionally, and it's getting awfully messy. And here's the thing I find so upsetting. Younger people trying to get to grips with situations they're facing and trying to figure out what makes them tick are being sucked into the quagmire with alarming regularity by the ill-informed bog dwellers. To add to my worry, there's rarely a lifebuoy ring to be seen, and being that their red and white stripes are designed to make them visible, I don't think it's that I'm not looking hard enough. And even when I do find one to throw in, somebody already bogged down seems to willfully stand on it in order to make it unavailable to anyone struggling to get themselves to a place of clarity. How mean is that? Now, what I don't know is if people are doing that intentionally as part of the bias we encounter. I've always said that the extraversion bias is not just one thing, it's a complex combination of other biases. There's affinity bias, where we show favour to those more like us. Conformity bias, where we agree with the most vocal or strongest point of view. And confirmation bias, where we find what we look for. I explain all of these and in more detail in episode 125. I think what I've experienced the most is attribution bias, which is where we make judgments or assumptions based on a narrow range of behaviours. Not acceptable. And worse still, this is a form of alienating communication, the very opposite of the legacy I'm trying to create. I've noticed that some people are never happier than when others are struggling, unhappy or being persecuted. So is this quagmire behaviour a bit of toxic negativity? We've all heard of toxic positivity by now. That's where we feel the pressure to stay positive and upbeat all of the time, regardless of what's going on in our lives or in the world. Toxic negativity happens when someone is determined to spread misery. So back to the emotional contagion I mentioned a while back, this time the contagion is negative. It can happen if someone is envious or jealous, that kind of crab mentality where people only want to pull others down. It may even be a case of schadenfreude, which is pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. Now all of that sounds a bit mean, doesn't it? But I can't quite understand why else people would not want to help others and enable them to be the best version of themselves. So when supposed introverts post about themselves being unable to function in any normal way in society, it can quickly descend into a vicious circle of doom that attracts the other bog dwellers. Does this sound like a mess? Well, it is. The problem is exacerbated by so many needs, behaviours and conditions being conflated with introversion. Of course they can coexist, but then it's more than natural introversion. I first talked about this way back in episode 51, so it's frustrating that here am I more than 200 episodes further on, still needing to talk about it. but talk about it I will for as long as I need to. I saw a post recently that said, when I'm quiet, it's not because I have nothing to say, it's because no one is listening. Well, quietly gutsy and supportively challenging little old me over here is not going to give up when no one is listening. If anything, I'm going to be more persistent and more persuasive. That's part of my flourishing choice. Not hiding, not being silenced, not making myself small. So consider this your invitation to join me in the self-development path so you understand the mislabelling and the impact it can have on us. This is me throwing you one of those scarce lifebuoy rings so you can get the clarity you want and need. Ready? Let's start by remembering that introversion, according to Jung, who introduced the term in his work around psychological types, said that introversion is when someone directs their interest towards their own thoughts and feelings. It describes someone who needs to recharge quietly and notices the impact the world has on them. We know from more recent functional neuroimaging studies that our brains light up differently to an extrovert's brain when stimulated in the same way. So we really are wired differently, not weird. And yet there are the common mislabelling errors. And remember, these can coexist but are by no means a given. Number 1, shyness. This is a fear of social judgment and an awkwardness, discomfort or inhibition around people. It can be as a result of past experiences and trauma, overprotective helicopter parents and low self-esteem. Shyness can be overcome with different types of therapy if the individual deems it important enough. Of course, some introverts are shy, but many are not. They are not the same, but here's why people may conflate them. I decline to engage with the banter in the office, as it's not generative and is usually at someone else's expense, which I detest. I am not shy. I am mindful about where I expend my energy, and being alone for me is far from being lonely. Number 2, social anxiety. Social anxiety, also known as social anxiety disorder or social phobia, is an overwhelming fear of social situations with the accompanying self-consciousness and embarrassment. It has the ability to cause massive disruptions to the way people experience life as they are too afraid to engage. Generalized anxiety is a mental health condition which shows up as excessive worrying. Neither of these are the same as introversion. We prefer quieter settings, and our social batteries don't hold their charge particularly well, especially in the presence of energy vampires. I'm not socially anxious. I simply have little time for social settings that drain me. I'm not fearful of them, simply wary. Here's why people might conflate the two. I refuse invitations or make feeble excuses when people won't accept a no, so they make their own stories up. It's kind of normal for humans to do that because we are meaning-making machines. So in an attempt to understand, we make our own stories up. Social anxiety and generalized anxiety are not the same as introversion, but the fact that people often conflate them does help explain why we need to up our assertiveness skills. Number 3, misanthropy. Natural introverts don't hate people. Misanthropes do, though. They dislike or distrust humankind and openly show contempt. It's not a mental illness per se, but maybe a symptom of one. For instance, social anxiety disorder. Because misanthropes avoid social situations, you can see how we introverts might be mislabelled as a misanthrope. We introverts are more likely to keep ourselves to ourselves or with a small group of trusted friends and happily spend time on our own or with our beloved pets. Number 4, depression. Let's be clear that real depression is a mental health condition marked by low mood, deep sadness, fatigue, and disinterest in anything. In extreme cases, depression may cause someone to take their own life. As Robin Williams was reported to have said, "People don't fake depression, they fake being okay." He closed with, "Remember that, be kind." People experiencing true depression often refer to it as the black dog that follows them around. There are many treatments, from talking therapies to prescribed drugs, to help with depression. Here's part of the problem though. It's not uncommon for people to bandy depression around when actually they're a bit down in the dumps. That has the potential to trivialise something very serious that people need help for. Being introverted doesn't mean being sad or depressed. In fact, many natural introverts are blissfully happy in solitude and being in our own world. Number 5, unambitious. Introverts don't always volunteer enthusiastically or jump in first, but that doesn't mean we lack ideas, aspirations, or presence. We are the quiet observers, the deep thinkers, the considerate listeners. Our think, say, think communication process can leave people uncertain about whether we have a valuable contribution to make. And I can see why people might make the assumption that we lack ambition, as we tend to keep our heads down. But their assumption about why we're doing that is definitely part of the extraversion bias. On the whole, we tend to hope that our work speaks for itself, although we know in our heart of hearts that it doesn't, and at some stage we're going to have to advocate for ourselves. But the truth is, until we can do that, we get passed over for promotions and other opportunities. Number 6, antisocial. Oh, if only people could see we introverts when we are with people who get us, exploring topics or hobbies we really enjoy. They would then know for a fact that we're not antisocial, but we are selectively social. Our batteries require us to be discerning about where and how we're spending our time, and we really thrive in the right environments. But as soon as we get a hint of a whiff of fakery or forced social engineering, you won't see us for dust. So if you're one of those people mislabelling us as antisocial, I hate to break it to you, but you're just not our cup of tea. So we're not relaxing and letting our guard down in your company. Just last episode, number 264, I spoke about this, including how and where we spend our precious energy beans. Room for one more? Oh, go on then. Let me finish this list with one that really gets my goat. Number 7, arrogance. I've had this thrown at me many times over my long life by people who don't know me, people who would probably also call me antisocial because I choose not to socialise with them. I have my reasons, as you might imagine, and I have been judged harshly because of the choices I make. And you know what? I'm completely happy with that. In my younger years, this label of arrogance would probably have caused me to bend myself out of shape in order to fit in, or at least not be disliked by the name callers. Now, I really don't mind, as I know the truth, and I sleep well at night, keeping the type of company I choose. So, as I also said recently, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names barely break the surface of my skin these days. They used to hurt, but then I developed the necessary resilience and beliefs that enabled me to see their behaviour for what it really is. So having shared those 7 with you, I do want to add that it doesn't give people carte blanche to call people names, and that includes mislabelling people, whether done intentionally or not. The reality is that mislabelling and conflation does damage many people's mental health, as well as knocking their confidence and self-esteem. And of course, that then has a ripple effect into how they show up in the workplace, where it's likely to put a serious dent in their reputation, their sense of trust, and psychological safety. So what's the answer? Is there a simple answer even? Well, I'll happily share what I've been doing, and you're welcome to take my lead. In my quietly gutsy way, I call it out whenever I witness it, regardless of who it's coming from. Rank, position, and authority don't wash with me, and I won't let it slip these days. And as I mentioned earlier, if no one is listening, I get more persistent and more persuasive. Not louder, you notice. Loud is playing by their rules and risking getting caught in their game. I don't play their game, and I invite you to opt out too. From a moral standpoint, when they go low, I go high. You see, if we allow this kind of mislabelling to go unchallenged, so the dominant perception of we introverts is a negative one, we're unlikely to shift the bias. And then it doesn't take long before that impacts our belief system. Following the work I had to do to be able to call out this behaviour, I created a resource that has helped many, the Flip Your Limiting Beliefs course. This self-paced course has helped introverts like you and me to develop rock-solid beliefs grounded in reality that enable them to show up powerfully. And when we do that, the mislabelling doesn't get a hold of us. As introverts, we say, let's stop hiding or apologising and make a stand. As leaders, we say, ask, listen, understand, and then do better. We're all work in progress. As members of society and role models to those who look up to us, we say be curious rather than judgmental, and act as allies and advocates for those who find themselves talked over or excluded from conversations. Labels can be helpful as a way of useful categorisation, something we actually do from early childhood. But they are only helpful if they are correct and enable us to communicate and connect more compassionately. So let's kick the ones that don't apply into touch. Sayonara. Remember, we are not shy. We are not broken. We are not less than. We are introverts who hold the type of quiet power this world needs. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us, and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.